The forest doesn't get quiet when you're lost. It edits itself. Trails disappear, your compass needle hangs between breaths, and familiar sounds turn unfamiliar. Your friends whistle, your own name spoken too far away. In those moments, you realize the difference between being alone and being unseen. This is what lost campers learn when the map stops matching the ground and something else starts guiding you. Welcome to Mr. BlackWhisper. I used to mark my way with reflective tacks, little metal pins you press into bark so a headlamp can catch them from far off. They're supposed to save you when daylight goes bad. That autumn, I hiked into a state forest I knew well. Late start, thin moon, leaf litter like damp paper. I told myself I'd camp by the creek and finish the loop in the morning. But the creek ran lower than I remembered, and the bank I trusted had been chewed out by flood. My footprints filled with black water by the time I chose a lopsided spot between two maples. Night pushed in like a door, the kind of dark that forgets you exist unless you keep reminding it. I ate cold food. I set 3 tacks facing camp, 3 facing the way out. I zipped in. The wind pinched at the nylon just once and then retired. Silence has weight, and it settled. Sometime after midnight, I woke to a dim coin of light rotating between the trees. Someone else's lamp, low beam, lazy swing. I lay flat, letting the sound filter through the fabric. Boots on leaves, not heavy, not in a hurry. The light grazed my rainfly, slid off. It moved away, then stopped, then moved again. There was a careful rhythm to it. I told myself it was another camper passing through, off trail by mistake, trusting their GPS to redraw the world. I almost called out. Instead, I turned my headlamp off and listened to my own breath. When it was gone, I waited. And because waiting extends the shape of fear in your mind, I did something I shouldn't have. I unzipped and stood in socks. The cold bit the skin between toes. I turned my headlamp on low. My tacks answered like distant eyes, 3 white pricks, clean and reassuring. I rotated, found the other 3, neatly in line toward the creek. Good. The night hadn't shifted the math. I packed by feel at first light. My plan was simple. Follow the tacks back to the main trail. The forest under morning looked like a place after an argument. Raked, quiet, guilty. I shouldered my pack and started for those small bright proofs I'd left myself. The first tree wore 2 tacks. So did the second. By the 5th tree, there were 4, forming a little square. I stood still and let my breath slacken until I could hear the creek. The line of reflectors ran in a tidy curve I had not made. There's a kind of pride that keeps you walking even when your stomach is asking better questions. I followed the curve. The ground rose. The creek music lost its echo. The tacks were spaced evenly, not like my clumsy pattern. After 10 minutes, they guided me to an old logging road, sunken, overgrown, the kind you only find if you're looking for somewhere else. Far down that tunnel of brush, I saw the pale square of a trail marker nailed to a post. When I got close, I saw it wasn't a marker. It was a laminated map, one corner chewed. Tacked to the tree beside it, at head height, was a small plastic whistle on a lanyard. Red, the kind sold at the camp store. I touched it and felt a ridge down its spine, a crack that had been glued. I owned one exactly like it, bought cheap, dropped once, glued in a hurry. I reflexively checked my chest strap. Mine was gone. The road behind me quieted, and I realized I'd been listening for footsteps. Not hearing them is not the same as being safe. I pulled the laminated map off the nail and found beneath it a small square of foil punctured in 3 places, the back of a reflective tack. Whoever had placed those neat rows had done it for me, on my schedule, with my missing whistle, in a way that would keep me moving. Not toward the trailhead, but into a corridor where the brush thickened and the road narrowed into a gully you couldn't turn around in without dropping your pack. I stepped sideways, off the rut, into briar. I kept the map in my hand because I needed something to pretend to believe in. I followed the creek sound instead, cross-grained through alder and windfall, until I cut the real trail with its scuffed duff and candy wrappers and polite blazes. When I finally saw another human, a woman with hiking poles and a bright jacket, my voice came out thinner than I liked. She said, without prompting, that she never hikes alone anymore, not since the news about the guy they caught last spring, the one who used trail tacks to steer people into his motion camera grid. At the ranger station, I handed over the whistle. The ranger flipped it in his palm. Then in the lost and found box, there was a twin. He told me they'd been finding little clusters of reflectors in strange places. Sometimes there was nothing at the end but a clean stump where someone had sat and watched. I drove home with my headlamp on the passenger seat, glass turned to face the floor. That night, I taped over the reflective strips on my pack, and when I closed my eyes, the pins bloomed in the dark like the bright, patient teeth of a trap. The lights weren't there to get me found. They were there to find me. We were three. Me, my brother Liam, and his girlfriend. Weather turned fast the second afternoon. Fog from the valley that moved like breath over mirror. We had a high trail with switchbacks and a long cut toward a saddle the ranger circled on our map. It took 2 hours for the line between path and hillside to blur. Then one careless misstep, and we were not three anymore. I didn't see Liam slide. I heard it, a dry skitter and a clipped oath, and then the blunt silence of stopped momentum. Fog made sound weird. It took my name and threw it uphill. When I shouted his, my voice came back thinner. His girlfriend grabbed my sleeve so hard I felt veins. We didn't move for a full minute. Then his whistle blew. 2 long, 1 short, the signal we'd joked about like kids. He was downslope, not far. I felt the string pull of obligation wrap around my ribs. "Stay put," I told her. "Tie to the tree." I lowered myself with a strap looped around my palm, boot edge in soft dirt, trying not to send a load of pebbles onto whoever was below. Another whistle. 2 long, 1 short. I called, "I hear you," and my mouth filled with wet air. He answered with the same pattern. I reached a ledge the size of a doormat, my boots wobbling on root ends, and peered into a milk of fog. "Talk to me," I said. "Tell me if you're hurt." The whistle again, identical, so perfectly on beat, it sounded recorded. Wind changed. The fog loosened. Through it, I saw a white thing hanging from a stub of branch, a cheap plastic whistle on a black cord. It swung slightly and then went still. Below, the hillside fell away into a slope too steep for the normal path. No Liam, no fresh slide. Just the suggestion of prints leading sideways and down. For a long time I watched that little whistle. It had grime rubbed into the raised letters like someone had thumbed it. I climbed back to the trail, heart hammered small, and told her what I'd found. We did what you're supposed to do. We stayed put, made ourselves obvious, called 911 while we still had bars, gave coordinates, tried not to feed the panic machine. The dispatcher told us to blow our whistles every 5 minutes. We did. Each time, faint and precise, the same 2 long, 1 short floated back from downslope. It never overlapped ours. It waited. It wanted us to go first. The search team found us by mid-afternoon, men in orange vests moving like careful punctuation in the fog. Their leader, a woman with a braid thicker than my wrist, listened to the echo pattern and didn't like it. She sent 2 down on ropes to the stub branch. When they came back, they carried the whistle in a bag. The cord had been tied around the branch with a knot neat as a gift. Downslope there were footprints in pine duff, 2 sets. One had a drag in the right foot, the other moved beside it. They ended at a low shelf where the ground had been dusted clean by boots. After that, older prints, scuffed, muddled. The fog had erased the rest. We waited in the dark with the team until just after midnight when the radio said they had him, not up or down but far sideways on an old fire road. He was walking, coat gone, hands out like he was testing glass. His face had those small, bloodless scratches you get from brush. He didn't have his whistle. He didn't have his pack. He said a man had led him along the contour, told him not to shout, that sound travels wrong in weather, that he'd fall if he kept making noise. The man had blown a whistle for him instead. So they'll find us, and then tied it to a branch while Liam drank from a trickle. The man had a voice you trust in emergencies. Steady, practical, logging small details without judgment. He told Liam he'd go ahead to flag the trail. He didn't come back. They took our statements and said the quiet part out loud only once. Sometimes it isn't the mountain that steals people. Sometimes it's people. They'd had reports. Hikers misdirected, guided, gear siphoned while owners were kept safe. The braid-haired leader's jaw flexed when she said it. She kept her eyes on the fog like it might form a face. We went home. Weeks later, I was in a hardware store when 3 whistles on a peg caught the light. I stood there long enough for a clerk to ask if I was finding everything. I said yes, and heard it wrong in my own mouth. When I think about that day, I don't replay the fall. I replay the sound of our whistles taking turns, the way whoever held the other one waited for us to finish, counted our beats, and then fed our hope back to us, pre-measured, familiar, safe. He knew I would come for the sound of myself. Solo site near a reservoir, off-season, just me and the shorebirds picking at the mud fringe. The sun fell and took the heat with it. My headlamp made a pale tunnel filled with breath vapor. The nearest other camper was a pair of red eyes across the water, taillights of a truck that arrived late and never shut off. I set my tent behind a low berm, not visible from the access road. I had done this 100 times and lived to tell it, which is its own kind of arrogance. I boiled water for a pouch that promised chili and delivered warmth. Night carried smells like freight. Fish, creosote, cold metal. I tucked in. If you sleep alone enough, you get to know the signatures of the dark. The small peck of a rodent testing nylon. The gliss of leaves dragged by wind. The human sounds are wrong in a special way. They edit the silence instead of blending into it. That night, around 3, something edited. A twig pop, a line tug, quick and taut, like someone had tripped. I held still. The editing didn't repeat. Morning told the first lie. Everything looked normal. Coffee tasted like decisions. The second lie was a line of sticks I hadn't made, 3 short ones placed end to end in a perfect arrow pointing at my tent door. Cute, I thought. Some kid, some prank. The truck across the water was gone. The print of its tires had scalloped the shore. I walked the perimeter like a cop in a crime show and found the third lie. A thin white cord stretched ankle-high between 2 deadfall branches about 15 feet in front of my tent door. The cord was cheap, the kind wrapped around tarps at gas stations. One end was knotted, the other looped twice and made fast to a stub. It was tight enough that if you came out fast and blind in the night, you'd hit it, go down, and roll. The slope beyond wasn't deadly. It was muddy. I cut the cord with my knife because I was angry. Anger can be a mask that shuts out other senses. Only when I was halfway through breaking camp did I see the fourth lie, small stones arranged in a ring near the edge of the berm. Inside it, 3 wet footprints, not shoe prints, bare feet. The toes were splayed like someone trying to find ribs of support in the mud. They faced away from me, toward the water. Mine were the only prints leading in. The bare ones led out, and then stopped at a section of shoreline where a boat could sit without anyone seeing it from the ramp. I drove straight to the ranger office because reasons feel thinner if you keep them to yourself. The woman behind the plexiglass had the dry exasperation of someone who has seen the same stupid trick too many times. She took notes. She told me about stringing, people who set low trip lines and then come in when you hit the ground in the night while you're confused. While your tent door is unzipped and your headlamp is in your teeth. They don't take everything, just a wallet, a phone, a pack, enough to make you walk out light and ashamed. If you catch them, they run. If you chase them, the mud keeps you slow. What unnerved me wasn't the rope. It was the ring of stones and the wet footprints inside it. as if someone had stood in that little circle for a while, considering, building the story of me in their head. They'd watched me long enough to know where I'd planted my feet, how I moved when I woke, what I'd do if I heard a harmless noise at 3 a.m. That night at home, I pretended not to check the locks twice. My phone lit my face and made the room feel like a tank. In the dim reflection, my eyes looked like the ovals headlamps catch in the dark, the ones that stare and then vanish. I camp less now, and when I do, I set bright flags at shin height around the tent, trash looking enough to discourage trophies, visible enough to warn me if someone moves them. I sleep with the door zipper loop tucked around my wrist. I tell myself, these are layers of safety. But sometimes, in the gentlest hour before dawn, I remember the neat arrow of sticks the stranger left, pointing at a door I had thought was mine alone. I started noticing the strings only after I stopped tripping over them. The trailhead lot had 3 cars when we arrived and 1 when we came back the next morning. We, in this case, were just me. I'd convinced myself an overnight would reset my head. The mountain was full of dry light. Every leaf licked it up and turned over in brightness. I lost the trail the honest way, in a windfall mess of snapped trunks where a storm had stitched 2 switchbacks into 1. I knew the trick: pick a bearing, move clean, find the line again. I didn't. I found a deer path that loved the contour so much it carried me far from where I needed to be, and by the time the trees opened to reveal a cluster of old foundations half-eaten by moss, I had the sour mouth of someone who could not argue himself out of his mistake. There were huntsman's nails in some of the timbers, velvet with rust. A length of stovepipe lay in the leaves like a spine. On one wall, long gone, there was a shadow where maps once hung. The shadow's edges were oddly clean. It took me too long to understand what I was looking at. It wasn't a shadow. It was a piece of plywood painted the same tired brown as the wall, hinged at the top with 2 dull screws. Someone had made a false wall. I loosened one screw with the back of my knife. The panel dropped on my hand with a soft thump, and the smell of old paper came out like a stored breath. Inside were maps. Not topographic quads, but printouts, drawn and edited by a home printer that chewed edges. Each map had bright tape on it, the kind surveyors use, and names written in neat block letters along the margins. Some names were common, some weren't. In the top right corner of each page, someone had penciled dates. The most recent was 2 days old. A yellow sticky note near the center held a list: water source by stump, game trail cut south, bridge slat missing. Good. Beside it, a Polaroid of a log crossing with a single slat popped free, not enough to fail under weight, but enough to startle and tip a pack-heavy person sideways. There were pins too, silver pushpins stabbed through places where trails did strange things. Next to some pins, annotations. Good call point. Can hear road but can't see. Dogs bark here sometimes. Underneath the maps was a layer of IDs, photocopies of driver's licenses, names blacked badly by marker so you could still make them out if you tried. The survival lesson pressed into me then wasn't about finding north. It was this: a person had been practicing the art of lost people. I put the panel back, not well, my fingers loud on the screws. The forest had gone tinny with noon. I retraced to where I could hear the thin wash of a creek and took it downhill, stepping stones, not footprints, until it joined a path fatter than it had a right to be. At the lot, the other car had gone. My windshield wiper was lifted, not like a prank, but like an invitation. Under it, a business card: volunteer search and rescue, happy to help. No name. A number handwritten in a pen that had blotted at the 7s. I didn't call. I drove out on a road that had not felt long on the way in. At the first gas station, I told the woman at the counter more than she needed to know. She listened like a netting being weighed down, then pointed to the corkboard by the coffee. "Been a guy leaving those cards," she said. "People say he shows up before the sheriff, friendly, knows the trails, asks a lot of questions." I filed a report, and the deputy wrote things into a pad like he was translating me. He said that sometimes people make themselves part of the story to feel useful. That sometimes useful men learn to enjoy the feeling of holding someone else's map. The plywood was gone when they hiked in 2 days later. Bare wall, clean marks where screws had been. Back home, I spread my own maps on the kitchen table and stared long enough for the coastlines to look like torn fabric. I wrote my name in tiny letters on the back of each, as if that would anchor me to them. It's a childish gesture, but then so is tying a slat loose on a bridge and waiting to see who steps in the same place again and again. When I lock the front door now, I picture a room in the woods made of paper and patience, a place where someone learns your paths before you do, then leaves a card under your wiper so you'll think of him when you're frightened. It is a genius built out of a very old thing, the pleasure of being needed, twisted into a hook. He mapped us like animals and called it search. We chose the lake because the wind would keep the bugs down, and because the path in was long enough to deter the party crowd. I say we, but by nightfall, it was only me. My friends had pushed back to their car after a late start, promising breakfast back in town. The last boat's wake flattened out to glass. The loons called like they were rehearsing grief. I pitched my tent on a slight rise above the shore. The water at the edge did that soft finger tap it does when it wants to convince you it is harmless. Across on the opposite bank, birch peeled its paper in elegant scrolls. For a while, I watched the last kite of light carry color into the black pines. When it was gone, the lake kept the memory, holding a faint smudge of sky under the surface like a secret. Sometime near midnight, voices skimmed across the water. Not loud, not drunk, just conversation riding the flat mirror. 2 men and a woman, by cadence. They weren't camping across from me. There was no fire, no glow. They were on the water. Their words didn't carry, just the shape of speech. Every so often, a clink like metal on hull. They laughed, but always cut it short, like they were remembering to keep something sealed. You want to believe in normal. I told myself it was night fishing. I told myself it was fine. Then one of them said my name, clear, like it had been pulled toward me by a rope. I froze inside the bag, my breath a hot animal. It could have been coincidence. I have a name other people have. Then the woman said my surname. She stretched it a little, like testing whether it tasted right, and then said, "The town my mail goes to." I sat up. A breeze kissed the surface, wrinkling it until the voices fuzzed and vanished. Fabric crackled loud under my knees as I crawled to the door. I unzipped only enough to let my eye out. The lake looked like a page waiting for ink. Nothing moved. In the morning, footprints tracked the strand to my tent. Bare feet again, less splayed this time, more deliberate. They circled and stopped at a point where you could see past the mesh to where my head would be when I slept. Another set of prints came out of the water and met the first. There were smears of black on the pebbles, soot or grease. It felt like waking to find someone had put words in your mouth while you dreamed. I packed in a hurry that pretended it wasn't a hurry. At the far end of the lake, the path passed a cove with a boathouse that had collapsed into its reflection. A narrow aluminum boat rested on a patch of grass under the shade of a spruce, its bow a blunt grin. In its stern lay a mesh bag with empty bottles, a pair of oars, and a roll of duct tape torn down the middle like someone had made a thin strip to label something. On the thwart, a black marker. One of the empty bottles had a label I recognized. Cheap whiskey, same as the man at the country store had pushed across the counter to a fellow with a rubbery smile while I waited for my change. On its neck, written in thin black, was my surname. The letters had bled a little. I did a stupid thing. I picked up the bottle. The glass was damp in a way that didn't belong to morning. My name looked like it was trying to smear away. I put it back careful as a man around a venomous thing and walked fast until the path widened and then ran for 20 minutes because there is a speed at which fear turns to heat, and heat is better than thought. When I reached the trailhead, there was a truck parked under the single sick tree that tried to call itself shade. The man from the store sat behind the wheel eating crackers. methodical. He watched me in the same way someone looks at weather coming in, curious but distant. I didn't stop. You never know if telling is helping or feeding. At home, I tried to reverse engineer the conversation across the water. All it would take is a phone and a search of trailhead registrations, a clerk with a loose mouth, cameras in the store picking up a license plate and linking it to a name. Or simpler, while I stood at the counter paying for stove fuel, my ID came out and lay face up, and the man next to me read it. The wind carries sound. Greece carries a name from a marker to a bottle to a whisper at midnight. People talk about being watched. This was being repeated. As if the lake itself heard my name and practiced it all night until it could say it back. I don't go back there alone. I don't keep my driver's license in a clear sleeve anymore. I camped with friends in June and it was fine, the way a healed scar is fine until your hand finds it without looking. Sometimes, when the house is asleep and the neighborhood has the cotton-weight quiet of 3 a.m., I swear I hear that clipped little laugh they use between words, held in the bowl of the dark, traveling over a surface I can't disturb. They never needed to scare me off the lake. I was already gone.